The blood on her hands had gone cold by the time she found the wolf pup in the drainage ditch behind the tannery. Elara had been scrubbing hides since before dawn, her fingernails cracked and stinging from the lye solution, the chemical burn crawling up her forearms in patches of angry red. The tannery sat at the lowest edge of the Grey March Pack territory, downwind from everything, where the smell of rotting flesh and oak bark tannin settled into your hair, your clothes, your skin, until you stopped being a person and became just another thing that reeked. She was 23 years old, and she could not remember the last time someone had stood close enough to her to have a conversation without wrinkling their nose. The whimpering was so faint she almost mistook it for the creak of the drying racks in the wind. But there it was again, a thin, reedy sound like a newborn kitten, except rawer, wetter, more desperate. She found it wedged between two stones where the drainage channel narrowed. A wolf pup, barely 2 weeks old, its silver fur matted with mud and something darker. One of its hind legs bent at an angle that made her stomach lurch. Its breathing came in shallow stutters, each exhale a tiny whistle through fluid-filled lungs. The pup's eyes were still sealed shut, the way wolf pups' eyes stayed for the first 10 days, except this one should have opened them by now. The lids were crusted, fused with dried discharge. Someone had thrown it away. In the Grey March Pack, runts were culled, pups born too small, too weak, pups whose wolves failed to manifest in the womb. It was not cruelty, according to Alpha Renard. It was mercy. It was practical. Resources were finite. The pack could not afford to feed mouths that would never contribute. This was what he said at every quarter-moon address, standing on the stone platform in the great hall with his silver hair combed back and his reading glasses perched on his nose, looking more like an irritated accountant than a pack leader. He kept spreadsheets. He calculated caloric intake per member. He ran the Grey March Pack like a mid-sized corporation with a tight operating budget, and in his calculations a blind runt pup with a broken leg was a line item to be eliminated. Elara had been a line item once, too. She picked the pup up with hands that still burned from the lye. It weighed almost nothing. She could feel each rib through its wet fur, the frantic hummingbird flutter of its heart against her palm. It opened its ruined mouth and let out a sound that was barely a sound at all, just a vibration against her skin. She should put it back. She knew this. If anyone saw her with a culled pup, if anyone reported to Renard's beta that the tannery Omega was hoarding rejects, the punishment would be swift and public. Last winter, old Margit from the kitchens had tried to sneak scraps to a litter of feral cats behind the pack house. Menard had docked her rations for a month and reassigned her to the waste pits. Margit was 67. She had not survived the reassignment. Elara tucked the pup inside her shirt, against the skin of her stomach where her body heat was strongest. It squirmed once, then went still, its nose pressing into the hollow beneath her ribs. She did not put it back. That evening, in the narrow closet that served as her quarters behind the tannery's boiler room, she cleaned the pup with a rag dampened in warm water. The closet smelled of copper pipes and mildew, and the single bare bulb overhead cast everything in a harsh yellow that made her hands look jaundiced. She had no milk, no formula, nothing a pup this young needed. What she had was a dropper she had stolen from the tannery's chemical storage, and a tin of condensed milk she had been saving for 3 weeks, rationing it 1 spoonful at a time into her morning water because the pack rations for Omegas had been cut again last month. She squeezed a single drop of milk onto the pup's lower lip. It did not respond. She tried again. Nothing. The pup's breathing had grown more labored, each inhale a tiny rattle. Elara did something then that she had not done since she was a child, since before her mother disappeared, since before Renard had found the 7-year-old girl hiding in the root cellar of a burned cabin on unclaimed territory and had graciously added her to the pack as its lowest member. She sang. It was not a real song. It had no words that belonged to any language she could name. It was something her mother used to hum while braiding Elara's hair. something that lived in her bones rather than her memory, a melody that rose and fell like breathing, like tides, like the slow turning of the earth. She sang it so quietly that even her own ears barely caught it, her lips almost touching the pup's matted head, her breath warm against its sealed eyes. The pup's mouth opened. She slipped the dropper in, and the pup swallowed. What Ilara did not know, what she could not have known, was that her lullaby did not stay inside the closet. It did not stay inside the tannery. It did not even stay inside the borders of the Grey March territory. It traveled, carried on something older and deeper than sound, something that moved through the earth itself like a current through water, through root systems and bedrock and the ancient ley lines that the first wolves had followed when they walked upright for the first time. It moved through the body of the world like a pulse, and 400 miles to the north, in the obsidian-walled war room of Ironhold Keep, the Alpha King stopped mid-sentence. His generals stared at him. Cale Blackmere did not stop mid-sentence. Cale Blackmere did not stop for anything. He had continued issuing battle orders while a rogue wolf's teeth were embedded in his left shoulder at the siege of Thornmoor. He had finished a treaty negotiation with the southern coastal packs while running 104-degree fever from wolfsbane poison. He was not a man who paused, but he paused now. His hand, which had been pointing at a position on the topographic map spread across the war table, dropped to his side. His amber eyes, which his enemies described as the color of a fire viewed through whiskey, went unfocused. His wolf, the massive and barely controllable beast that lived behind his ribs, and had not been fully calm in the 6 years since Cale had taken the throne at 24, did something it had never done before. It went quiet, not restless, not pacing, not snarling at the edges of his consciousness the way it always did, pressing against his skin from the inside, demanding blood or territory or the mate it had never found. Quiet, still, listening to a lullaby, to Disney. Cal heard it the way you hear something in a dream, not with his ears but with the spaces between his ribs, the hollow of his throat, the backs of his hands. A melody without words, without source, impossibly distant and impossibly intimate at once, as if someone were singing directly into the chambers of his heart. His beta, Dorian, was the first to speak. Cale, your eyes. Cale blinked. What about them? They went gold, Dorian said carefully. Full gold, both of them. About 10 seconds, the table had gone silent. 14 generals, the best military minds in the Northern Territories, sat frozen in their seats. They had all seen the Alpha King's eyes flash gold in battle, in rage, in the grip of his wolf's influence. But never like this, never softly. I need a location, Cale said. His voice came out rough, scraped raw by something he could not name. South-southeast, 400 miles, give or take. What pack territory is that? Dorian pulled up the territorial maps on his tablet. That would be a Grey March. Small pack, maybe 200 members. Alta Renard Volkov. He keeps his numbers lean and his borders tight. We have a non-aggression pact with them renewed 3 years ago. No notable incidents. Kyle was already walking toward the door. Cancelled the rest of the briefing. Cale, Dorian stood. We're in the middle of planning the eastern border deployment. Then plan it without me. You cannot just leave for Greymarsh territory on a... He hesitated. On a feeling. Cale stopped at the door. He did not turn around. When he spoke, his voice had dropped into the register that his soldiers called the frequency of absolute authority, the tone that vibrated in your chest cavity and made your wolf want to lie down and show its belly. I have waited 6 years, he said. My wolf has been tearing me apart from the inside for 6 years. Whatever I just heard, wherever it is coming from, it is the first thing that has made him still since the day I shifted for the first time at 13. I am going to Greymarch. I am going now. And Dorian, if anyone attempts to stop me, I will not be responsible for what happens. He did not wait for a response. Dorian stood in the empty doorway for a long moment, listening to the sound of the Alpha King's boots receding down the stone corridor at a pace that was not quite a run, but was certainly not a walk. "Well," he said to the silent room of generals, "I suppose we should move the Eastern deployment discussion to Thursday." 3 days. That was how long it took Cale Blackmere to cross 400 miles of mountain and forest and disputed borderland. He drove the first 200 in a military vehicle he commandeered from the Ironholt motor pool, pushing the engine until the transmission whined on the mountain switchbacks. When the roads ended, he shifted and ran. His wolf was enormous, jet black, dense as a shadow, with amber eyes that glowed faintly in the dark like banked coals. Most alphas could sustain a full run for 6, maybe 8 hours before the shift became too taxing. Kyle ran for 36 hours straight, stopping only to drink from mountain streams, the icy water sharp as broken glass against his tongue. He did not sleep. He did not eat. The lullaby pulled him forward like a thread tied around his sternum, growing stronger with every mile, and his wolf followed it with a single-mindedness that bordered on religious devotion. On the morning of the 3rd day, he crossed the unmarked border into Greymarsh territory. He shifted back to human form at the tree line, dressed in the clothes he had carried in a pack strapped to his wolf's back, and walked the remaining 2 miles to the pack's main settlement on foot. He looked, by all accounts, like a man who had not slept in 3 days, because he was. His dark hair was tangled with pine needles. There was a cut across his left cheekbone from a branch he had not bothered to dodge. His shirt was wrinkled and stained with sweat and river water. He also looked, by all accounts, like the most dangerous person who had ever set foot in Greymarsh. Because he was, the sentries at the settlement gate took one look at him and called for their alpha. Renard Volkov arrived at the gate 17 minutes later, which Kyle noted was 12 minutes too long for a proper alpha response time. The man was shorter than Cale had expected, maybe 5'8", with thin shoulders and reading glasses pushed up into his silver hair. He smelled like printer toner and spearmint gum, and the faintest whiff of fear masked beneath a carefully maintained air of bureaucratic calm. Alpha King Blackmere. Renard's voice was steady, but his heartbeat was not. Cale could hear it from 10 feet away, a rapid, rabbit-quick flutter. "This is an unexpected honor. If you had sent word ahead, we would have prepared a proper welcome." "I am not here for a welcome," Cale said. "Of course." Renard adjusted his glasses. He had the precise, fussy movements of a man who organized his desk drawers by color. "May I ask the purpose of your visit?" "You have someone here," Khalil said. "A woman. She sings." Renard blinked. "Sings?" Cale did not elaborate. He was not in the mood for elaboration. The lullaby was stronger now, so close that it vibrated in his back teeth, and his wolf was clawing at the inside of his chest with a desperation that made it difficult to form complete sentences. Every cell in his body was oriented toward a single point, somewhere beyond the settlement's main buildings. Somewhere low and downwind, somewhere that smelled like chemicals and animal hide, and underneath all of that, underneath everything, like rain on warm stone and wild thyme and the first breath after a long dive underwater, like mate. "Take me to your tannery," Cale said. Renard's left eye twitched, an almost imperceptible movement, but Cale caught it because Cale caught everything. It was not surprise, it was recognition. The man knew exactly who worked in his tannery. The man knew exactly who Cale was looking for. "Our tannery is not a suitable location for a royal visit," Renard said. "Perhaps we could discuss this in my office. I have some excellent—" Now, the single word landed like a physical blow. Renard's wolf, a small and tightly controlled thing that Cale could feel cowering behind the man's ribcage, submitted instantly. Renard's shoulders dropped half an inch. His chin dipped. It was involuntary, the body responding to a dominance so vast it operated on a biological level, and Cale saw the flicker of resentment in Renard's eyes as it happened. "Of course," Renard said, and his voice was thinner now. stripped of its professional warmth. This way, the tannery was worse than Kyle had imagined, and he had spent 3 days imagining very little else. The building itself was a long, low structure of corrugated metal and cinder blocks streaked with rust and chemical residue. The smell hit him from 50 yards out, a wall of ammonia and putrefaction and lye so thick he could taste it on his tongue, and his wolf recoiled violently before surging forward again because underneath the chemical assault that scent was there. Rain on warm stone, wild thyme. The first breath. She was behind the building, in the drainage area where the runoff from the hide processing collected in shallow, stinking pools. She was on her knees in the mud, scrubbing a hide stretched over a wooden frame, her arms submerged to the elbows in a solution that was visibly eating at her skin. She wore a canvas apron over a dress that had been washed so many times it had lost any definitive color, settling into a gray that matched the mud and the sky and the corrugated walls. Her hair, dark auburn, was pulled back in a knot that was coming undone, loose strands sticking to the sweat on her neck. She was thin, not fashionably thin, not athletically lean, but thin the way people get when they have been hungry for a long time. The kind of thin where you can see the tendons working in the forearms and the collarbones stand out like shells, and the body has begun consuming itself to stay alive. She did not look up when they approached. She was singing. It was barely audible over the slosh of the solution and the creak of the drying racks, but Cale heard it with every molecule of his being. The same melody. The lullaby. She was humming it absently, the way people hum when they are trying to keep themselves company, when they have no one else to hum to, and there was a lump beneath her shirt. Something small and warm pressed against her stomach, and Cale realized with a jolt that the lullaby was not for herself. She was singing to something she was hiding, and then the wind shifted. She stopped scrubbing. Their hands went still in the solution. Her back straightened slowly, vertebra by vertebra, as if something were pulling her upright by an invisible string attached to the crown of her head. Cale watched her nostrils flare, watched the muscles in her neck tighten, watched her whole body go rigid with a recognition so primal it bypassed consciousness entirely. She turned around. Her eyes were gray, not the flat, undifferentiated gray of an overcast sky, but a complex, layered gray-silver at the edges, and darker toward the center, the color of lake water in winter, of smoke, of the fur of the wolf pup pressed against her stomach. There was a scar across her left cheekbone, a thin white line that ran from just below her eye to the corner of her jaw, and it had healed badly, slightly raised and puckered at one end. She had gotten it years ago, Cale would learn later. A broken bottle, thrown by a drunk pack member who had been aiming for the wall behind her but had not bothered to care about accuracy because she was only the Omega, and what did it matter? She stared at him. He stared at her. The world performed its familiar trick of falling away. The tannery, the mud, the chemical stench, Renard standing 3 feet behind him with his glasses fogged and his jaw tight. The distant sound of the pack settlement going about its afternoon business. All of it receded to the periphery of Cale's awareness, until there was nothing left except the woman kneeling in the drainage ditch with ruined hands and a stolen wolf pup hidden under her shirt and eyes like winter smoke. His wolf did not roar. It did not snarl. It did not surge forward with the violent possessiveness that Cale had always assumed would accompany the mate bond. Instead, it did something that frightened him far more than any of those things. It lay down inside his chest like a dog settling before a fire. It has been searching for its entire life, and it closed its eyes and it let out a breath so deep and final that Cale felt his own lungs empty in response, and for the first time since he was 13 years old, the constant pressure behind his ribs, the relentless, gnawing restlessness that had driven him to wars and negotiations and sleepless nights, pacing the halls of Ironhold Keep, was gone. She was still staring at him. Her expression was not awe, not recognition, not the swooning submission that lesser romance stories would have assigned to her. It was something far more complicated. It was the look of a woman who had just smelled salvation and was waiting for the trap to spring shut. "Were you?" she said. Her voice was rough from disuse. She did not talk much, Cale would learn. There was no one to talk to. "Cale Blackmere," he said. "Alpha King of the Northern Territories." Something flickered in her gray eyes. Not surprise exactly, more like a grim confirmation of a joke the universe had been building to for 23 years. Of course the mate bond would pair the most powerful wolf in the continent with a tannery worker who smelled like dead animals and lie. Of course. "And you are," he said. "Nobody," she said. "I am nobody." The lump under her shirt moved. The pup, disturbed by the tension in her body, let out a thin whine that was audible only to wolf ears. Giles' gaze dropped to her midsection. His eyes went gold. "What is that?" he said. Elara's hand moved to cover the lump. It was a reflexive gesture, protective, instinctive, and it told Cale more about her than any words could have. She was not nobody. Nobody does not protect something that weak with that much ferocity. "It is a pup," she said, a runt. "I found it in the drainage ditch. Your host can explain the pack's culling policy to you if you need context." The last sentence was delivered with a flatness that was almost defiant, and Cale filed it away. She was not the trembling, grateful Omega the formula demanded. She was tired and angry and expecting punishment, and she was not going to beg. Renard stepped forward. His composure had returned, or at least the performance of composure. "Alpha King Blackmere, I must apologize for this situation. This Omega is the pack's lowest-ranked member. She should not be addressing you directly. Elara, go back to your work." Elara did not move. Cale did not look at Renard. He was watching Elara's hands, the way they curled protectively over the pup, the way the chemical burns on her forearms traced angry red lines up to her elbows like a map of everything that had been done to her. His wolf, which had been lying down so peacefully a moment ago, began to vibrate, not with restlessness, with something else, something colder and more precise. "How long?" Cale said, and his voice had changed. Renard blinked. "How long what? How long has she been working in this tannery? With these chemicals, without protective equipment?" "She has been assigned to the tannery since she was 14, Renard said. He said it the way you might report a line item in a quarterly review. Factual, detached. She was found on unclaimed territory as a child. Orphan, no identifiable pack origin, no wolf manifestation. We took her in and assigned her productive work suitable to her capabilities." Cale turned to look at Renard. It was the first time he had taken his eyes off Elara, and Renard visibly wished he had not. The Alpha King's face had gone very still, the way a lake goes still before a storm, and his eyes were fully gold now, solid amber from lid to lid, without a trace of the human brown that usually tempered them. "Suitable," Cale said. "Alpha Blackmere, I assure you our Omega program is fully compliant with Continental Pack welfare standards. We can discuss the details in my—" "You will not discuss anything," Cale said. "You will stand exactly where you are. You will be silent. And when I am finished here, you and I will have a conversation about welfare standards that you are not going to enjoy." He turned back to Elara. She had not moved. She was watching the exchange with the expression of someone observing a nature documentary, interested but distanced, as if none of this could possibly have anything to do with her. "The pup," Cale said. "Let me see it." She hesitated. Her fingers tightened against her stomach. "I am not going to hurt it," he said, and his voice did something that surprised them both. It went soft, not gentle in the performative way of powerful men who are trying to appear approachable, soft in the involuntary way, the way a voice softens when speaking to a wounded thing. "I promise." Slowly, Elara reached into her shirt and withdrew the pup. It lay in her cupped hands, tiny, filthy, its silver fur matted, its broken hind leg splintered with a piece of tannery leather and twine. Its eyes were still shilled shut. It was breathing, but barely. Each inhale a whispered struggle. Cale reached out. His hand, scarred across the knuckles from a dozen fights, dwarfed both of hers. He touched the pup's head with one finger, just the tip, and the pup went still. Not dead still, calm still, the way Cale's wolf had gone still when he first heard the lullaby. The pup turned its muzzle toward his finger and pressed against it. Something passed through the contact. Cale felt it in his fingertip and in his solar plexus simultaneously, a pulse of something that was not quite energy and not quite warmth and not quite light, but was somehow all three, flowing from the pup through his finger and into the vast network of his wolf's awareness, and he understood. The pup was not blind, its eyes were not sealed from infection. They were sealed because the wolf inside it was too powerful for its body, trapped and compressed like a star caught in a jar too small, and the body was failing because the power had nowhere to go. Ilara, she did not have this information. She did not know what the pup was. She had simply found a dying animal and chosen to save it because that was what she did. Because underneath the chemical burns and the scar and the 9 years of the tannery that had eaten her youth alive, there was something in her that answered suffering with tenderness, and that was the thing his wolf had heard from 400 miles away. Not the lullaby itself, the mercy behind it. "How did you keep it alive?" he asked. "Condensed milk," she said. "And the song? It only eats when I sing." "Do you know what you are?" he said. She blinked. "What I am." He almost told her then, almost explained that no ordinary Omega could channel a lullaby through 400 miles of earth and stone and ley line, that no wolfless woman could soothe a pup whose own power was killing it, that the scent coming off her skin was not the scent of an Omega or a Beta or even an Alpha, but something older, rarer, a frequency his wolf recognized from legends he had thought were metaphors. But he did not. Not yet, because she was kneeling in mud outside a tannery with chemical burns on her arms and a dying pup in her hands and the expression of a woman who had been told what she was for 23 years by people who had every reason to lie, and dropping the truth on her now would be another act of violence committed by a powerful person against an unprepared one. And his wolf, his impossibly still and impossibly clear wolf, would not allow it. Instead, he said, "You are coming with me." She looked at him the way a stray dog looks at an outstretched hand. Wanting, not trusting, not. "I cannot," she said. "That was not a request," he said. But then, because his wolf insisted, he added, "But it is not a command either. I'm asking, will you come with me?" She looked down at the pup in her hands. Its broken leg, its sealed eyes. The condensed milk would run out in 2 days, and even if it did not, the pup was dying and she knew it. She had known it since the moment she picked it up. She had chosen to fight for it anyway, with a dropper and a stolen tin and a song she barely remembered. But she was losing. "If I come," she said. "The pup comes, he said. "And I am not." She looked at Renard, then back at Cale. "I am not going to be another tannery. I am not going from one cage to a nicer cage." "No cage," Cale said. "You have my word." She studied him for a long moment. The mud was seeping through the knees of her worn dress. The chemical solution on her arms was beginning to dry, tightening the skin. The pup breathed its threadbare breaths against her palm. "All right," she said. "All right." The drive north was nothing like the frantic 3-day journey south. Cale had a vehicle brought to the Grey March border, a black SUV with tinted windows, driven by a member of his personal guard who had enough sense to keep his eyes on the road and his questions to himself. Elara sat in the back seat with the pup in her lap, and she did not speak for the first 4 hours. Cale sat beside her, not touching her, not crowding her. The mate bond was a living thing between them, a current that he could feel humming in the air every time she shifted position or breathed or tucked a strand of loose hair behind her ear. His wolf wanted to close the distance, to press his nose into the curve of her neck where the scent was strongest, to put his hand over hers and feel the pulse in her wrist. His wolf wanted these things with a desperation that made his hands shake slightly, and he kept them folded in his lap because she had asked for no cage, and a cage is not less of a cage because the bars are made of desire instead of iron. She spoke first. "The pup is getting worse," she said. She was right. Its breathing had thinned during the drive, each inhale more effortful than the last. Its body was hot against her stomach, feverish, the trapped power inside it burning through its limited reserves. "I know," Cale said. "I have a healer at Ironhold. She has seen cases like this before." "Like this?" Alara repeated. "You have seen pups like this?" "Twice," Cale said. He chose his words carefully. "They were born with more wolf than their body could hold. It is rare, but it can be treated if caught in time. And if not caught in time, then no," Cale said, because she deserved honesty more than comfort. She looked down at the pup. She began to hum. The melody filled the car. Cale's wolf settled deeper into its unprecedented calm, and the pup's breathing steadied, not healed, but sustained, held above the waterline by the sound of her voice. The driver's hands relaxed on the steering wheel. Even the engine seemed to run smoother. "That song," Cale said quietly. "Where did you learn it?" "My mother," Alara said. She stopped humming just long enough to answer. "I do not remember much about her. I remember the smell of her hair, dried lavender and wood smoke, and this song. Your mother, what happened to her?" "I do not know," Ellery said. "She was there, and then she was not. I was 7. I lived alone for a while. Then Renard found me." She said it without self-pity, which was worse than self-pity. They arrived at Ironhold Keep at dawn on the 4th day. The keep was carved into the face of a granite mountain, its obsidian walls catching the first light and throwing it back in fragments. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, and Alara looked at it the way a person looks at a wave they know is about to break over them. The healer, an elderly wolf named Sabul with hands like gnarled oak roots and eyes that missed nothing, examined the pup in the medical wing while Alara hovered 3 feet away, vibrating with a tension that Kaa could feel through the bond. Sable turned the pup gently, pressing her fingers along its spine, its rib cage, the sealed line of its eyes. She was quiet for a long time. "Sing to it," Sable said. "I have been singing to it," Alara said. "Sing to it now, while I work." Alara looked at Cale. He nodded. She began the lullaby again, and Sable placed both hands on the pup's chest and closed her eyes. And Cale saw what happened next, because his wolf eyes were sharper than human eyes, and because he was watching Alara with an attention that bordered on reverence. A light came from her hands, not from Sable's hands, from Alara's. A faint silver luminescence that traveled from her fingers through the air and into the pup's body wherever Sable's hands directed it. It was Alara's energy, Alara's power, channeled unconsciously through the lullaby, and Sable was merely the instrument that gave it shape. The pup's sealed eyes cracked open, slowly, painfully, like a door that has been swollen shut by rain. Beneath the crusted lids, the irises were gold. Not amber, not yellow. Gold, the pure metallic gold of a high-born alpha pup. The kind of pup that came along once in a generation. The kind of pup that the Grey March Pack's culling policy had thrown into a drainage ditch. The pup looked at Alara and whined. She burst into tears. It was the first time Cale had seen her cry. She cried silently the way people cry who have learned that noise attracts punishment, her shoulders shaking and her face twisted and her hands pressed over her mouth. The pup squirmed on the examination table, trying to crawl toward her with its one good leg, and she picked it up and pressed it against her chest, and the sobs racked through her body like earthquakes through loose soil. Cale stood in the doorway of the medical wing and gripped the stone frame hard enough to crack the mortar under his fingertips. His wolf was howling, not out loud, but inside, a long, sustained note of grief and rage and something fiercer than both, because he understood now that the tears were not about the pup. They were about every moment of the last 16 years that she had not been allowed to cry. Every chemical burn and missed meal and thrown bottle and cold closet and drainage pup that she had swallowed and swallowed and swallowed until the weight of unexpressed pain had become the architecture of her body. And now one small, golden-eyed wolf pup had cracked the dam. He did not approach her. He wanted to. His wolf was screaming at him to cross the room and wrap his arms around her and put his mouth against her hair and tell her that no one would ever hurt her again. But she had asked for no cage. So he stood in the doorway, and he held the frame, and he let her have the dignity of her own grief without making it about his need to fix it. Sable caught his eye over Elara's bent head. The old healer's expression was complicated. She made a small gesture toward Elara, a subtle pointing at her hands, and mouthed 2 words that Kale read on her lips with perfect clarity. Moonsinger. The term hit him like a physical blow. Moonsingers were myth, old wolf legend, the kind of story told to pups around campfires, about women who could heal with sound, who could channel the earth's energy through their voice, who were said to be the mates of the first Alpha Kings before the bloodlines thinned and the power was lost. Moonsingers had not existed for 300 years. The last documented one was a woman named Seraphina, who had healed an entire pack of plague victims during the Great Sickness of 1723, and who had been burned as a witch by humans 6 months later. Moonsinger, wolfless, powerless. Nobody. The Grey March pack had taken a Moonsinger, the rarest and most sacred wolf in existence, and put her in a tannery. The days that followed were strange and careful. Kale gave Elara a room in the residential wing of Ironhold, not the royal chambers, not a servant's closet, but a real room with a window that looked out over the mountain valley, and a bed with actual sheets and a door that locked from the inside. He showed her the lock twice, and told her the key was hers and no one else had a copy, and she had tested it 3 times before she believed him. The pup, which she had named Thistle for the way its newly opened eyes squinted against any light brighter than a candle, lived in a padded box beside her bed. Sable came twice a day to continue the healing work, and each time Elara sang while Sable directed the silver light, and each time Thistle grew a little stronger, a little louder, a little more insistent about being fed and held and sung to. Elara explored Ironhold the way a formerly feral cat explores a new home. Slowly, wall by wall, room by room, testing each space for threats before allowing herself to exist in it. She found the kitchen on her second day and stood in the doorway for 20 minutes, watching the cook staff work before the head cook, a massive woman named Bridget, who had arms like bread loaves and a voice like a foghorn, spotted her and demanded to know if she was going to stand there catching flies or come in and make herself useful. Elara could cook. This surprised everyone except Kale, who had already noticed the way she organized things, the way her hands moved with efficiency and care, the way she fed Thistle with a patience that spoke of someone who understood hunger as both a physical state and an art form to be managed. She had taught herself to cook in the Grey March kitchens before she was reassigned to the tannery, and her hands remembered what to do even when the rest of her had forgotten she was allowed to do it. She made a stew on her 3rd night at Ironhold. Venison and root vegetables and a combination of herbs that she selected by smell from Bridget's stores, rubbing each leaf between her fingers and inhaling before adding it or putting it back. The stew was extraordinary, not because it was complex or sophisticated, but because it was exactly right, each flavor in precise balance with every other. And Bridget, who had been cooking for the Ironhold pack for 31 years and did not give compliments, said, "Make that again tomorrow," and it was the highest praise in her vocabulary. Kale ate 3 bowls. He ate them in the kitchen, sitting on a stool at the prep counter because Elara was there, and his wolf could not tolerate being in any room that she was not in, and she gave him a look that was equal parts suspicion and disbelief when he asked for the 3rd. The push and pull between them had a rhythm. He advanced, she retreated, Not out of fear exactly, but out of disbelief. The mate bond was a constant hum between them, an awareness that she could feel as strongly as he could, but she treated it the way a person who has been burned treats the suggestion of a warm fireplace. The warmth was real, the memory of burning was also real, and he did not know yet which one to trust. On the 5th day, he found her in the library. Ironhold's library was a vast, vaulted room lined with shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling, the air thick with the smell of old leather and paper dust, and the beeswax used to polish the reading tables. It was Cale's favorite room in the keep, and finding her in it, curled in the window seat with Thistles sleeping in her lap and a book open on her knee, did something to his chest that he was not prepared for. She looked up when he entered. She had washed her hair that morning, he noticed. Without the grime and chemical residue, it was a deep auburn that caught the light from the window and turned it to copper. "I did not think anyone used this room," she said. "I use it every evening," he said. "Oh." She started to stand. "I can go." "Sit down," he said. Then, hearing how it sounded, he added, "Please, there is more than one chair." She sat. He selected a chair across from her, close enough to feel the bond, but far enough to respect the distance she maintained. He picked up a book from the side table, something he had been reading about mineral rights in the Eastern Territories, and opened it. They read in silence for an hour. It was the most peaceful hour of Cale's life. On the 7th day, Renard Volkov arrived at Ironhold. He came with an entourage of 6, including his beta and his pack lawyer, a thin woman with a briefcase and a smile that never reached her eyes. They arrived in a convoy of 3 vehicles, which was excessive for a diplomatic visit, and told Cale everything he needed to know about Renard's intentions. He met them in the great hall. Elora was in the kitchen with Bridget, which was where she spent most of her mornings now, and Cale had not told her about the visit, because he had wanted to handle it before it reached her. "Alpha King Blackmere," Renard said. His composure was fully restored. He wore a pressed suit, and his reading glasses were clean, and his shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He looked like a regional bank manager arriving for an audit. "I trust you are well. State your business," Cal said. He was sitting on the ironwood throne at the head of the hall, a massive chair carved from a single tree and worn smooth by 6 generations of Alpha Kings. He did not offer Renard a seat. "I have come regarding the Omega," Renard said. "Elora, she is a member of the Greymarch Pack and therefore subject to Greymarch authority. Her removal from our territory without formal transfer documentation constitutes a violation of Interpack Protocol under Article 17 of the—" "She is my mate," Cale said. The room went silent. Renard's lawyer stopped rustling her papers. The beta behind Renard's shoulder went pale. Renard did not react for a long moment. Then he removed his glasses and cleaned them on his tie, a gesture that Cale recognized as a delay tactic, buying time while his brain processed the implications. "I see," Renard said. "That is significant. However, the mate bond does not automatically dissolve pack membership. Under current continental law, a formal transfer requires—" "She was not a member," Cale said. "She was property. You listed her in your quarterly reports under asset management, not personnel." I checked. Renard's hand stilled on his glasses. "I had my legal team pull your filings," Cale continued. "Every quarterly report for the last 9 years. Elora is listed under fixed assets, subcategory labor, alongside the tannery equipment and the hide inventory. You did not classify her as a pack member because pack members are entitled to minimum welfare provisions that would have cost you money. You classified her as equipment so you could work her without restrictions. That is a mischaracterization of our administrative—" "It is a crime," Cale said. His voice had not risen. It had dropped, which was worse. "Under Continental Pack Law, Section 42, the classification of a sentient pack wolf as non-person chattel is punishable by dissolution of pack authority and transfer of territory to the nearest Alpha's jurisdiction. And as it happens, the nearest Alpha jurisdiction to Greymarch is mine." Renard's beta took a step backward. The lawyer's smile had evaporated. Now here is what surprised Cale, what complicated his narrative, what prevented him from simply destroying Renard in the way that his wolf and his rage demanded. Renard's face did something unexpected. It crumpled, not dramatically, not performatively, but in a small, private way, a tightening around the eyes and a downward pull of the corners of the mouth, the expression of a man confronting a truth he had been avoiding for a long time. It lasted only a few seconds before the bureaucratic mask slid back into place. But Cale saw it, and in that flicker he saw not a monster, but something almost worse, a man who had inherited a failing pack, who had watched the numbers decline year after year, who had made his choices not out of cruelty, but out of a desperate, small-minded pragmatism that had slowly, decision by decision, spreadsheet by spreadsheet, turned him into someone who could classify a child as equipment and sleep at night because the bottom line required it. It was not a redemption. It was not an excuse. It was a ghost of something that had once been decent, visible for a moment before the suit and the glasses and the quarterly reports buried it again. "I was trying to keep the pack alive," Renard said quietly. And then, as if hearing himself, he straightened. "My lawyer will review your claims. If the documentation supports your interpretation, your lawyer can review whatever she likes," Cale said. "Your pack is now under Ironhold oversight. You will remain as administrative alpha pending a full audit. If the audit reveals what I believe it will reveal, Greymart will be dissolved and its members absorbed into surrounding territories." And Renard looked at him. "If I discover that you knew what Elara was," Cale said, "if I discover that you knew what a moonsinger was worth, and you buried her in a tannery anyway, there will not be an audit." He let the implication hang. Renard left Ironhold 2 hours later. His shoes were still polished. His suit was still pressed, but the reading glasses sat slightly crooked on his nose, and he did not fix them. Elara found out about the visit because Bridget told her, because Bridget believed that keeping information from people for their own protection was the first step in putting them in a cage, and Bridget had been in cages of her own before she found Ironhold, and she had opinions about it. She confronted Cale in the library that evening. Thistle was perched on her shoulder, the pup having graduated from the padded box to Elara's body as its primary habitat. Its golden eyes tracked Cale with an intensity that was disconcerting in an animal so small. "You should have told me," she said. "I was going to," he said. "When?" "After it was handled." She crossed her arms. "That is what people say when they mean, after I decided for you. That is what Renard said every time he changed my work assignment, after it was handled, after the decision was made, after there was nothing left to do but accept it." Cale set down his book. He looked at her. She was angry, genuinely angry, and the force of it surprised him. Not because Omega should not be angry, but because this was the first time she had expressed a strong emotion directed at him. The first time she had treated him not as a benefactor or a threat or a confusing supernatural phenomenon, but as a person she was willing to fight with. It terrified and delighted him in equal measure. "You are right," she said. She blinked. She had clearly prepared for an argument, had marshaled her points and her defenses, and his immediate concession had thrown her off balance. "I am," she said cautiously. "I should have told you when I learned Renard was coming. I did not because I wanted to protect you from the stress, and protecting someone from information is a form of control. And I promised you no cages. I am sorry." She stared at him. On her shoulder, Thistle made a small sound that might have been approval. "You really are not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" She thought about it. "I expected you to be patient for about 2 weeks and then start making demands. I expected the soft voice to be a strategy. I expected the unlocked door to eventually be locked. And now it has been 7 days, and you have not touched me once, and the door is still unlocked, and you ate 3 bowls of my stew while sitting on a kitchen stool, and you looked happy, and I do not know what to do with any of that. Cale considered this. He could feel his wolf pressing against his skin, the mate bond singing between them like a plucked wire, and the effort of holding himself in his chair while she stood 3 feet away with her copper hair and her winter smoke eyes, and her anger was considerable. "I will continue not touching you," he said, "until you ask me to, and the door will remain unlocked. And if you make that stew again, I will probably eat 4 bowls, which will be embarrassing for both of us." Something happened to her face. A crack in the wall. Not a smile exactly, but the architecture of a smile, the foundation of one visible beneath the surface like a structure emerging from snow. She sat down in the window seat. He picked up his book. They read in silence until midnight. The weeks that followed had a rhythm. Elara worked in the kitchen. She healed Thistle, who grew with startling speed, the golden-eyed pup rapidly becoming a golden-eyed juvenile with long legs and a habit of stealing bread rolls from the cooling racks. She explored Ironhold further, finding the herb garden and the infirmary and the training grounds. She watched the pack wolves spar from the library window, pressing her palm flat against the glass. Sable continued her sessions twice a day, but the truth was becoming inescapable. It was not Sable's power that healed. It was Elara's. Sable was a conduit, a lens, but the light was Elara's, and it was growing. Not just in strength, but in scope. When she sang to Thistle now, the plants on the windowsill grew toward her voice. The guards stationed outside her door reported a profound sense of calm during her lullabies. A beater who had been suffering from chronic joint pain for a decade found himself pain-free after spending an afternoon in the kitchen while Elara hummed over the stew. She did not know she was doing any of this. The power operated below her conscious awareness, tied to her emotions, to her compassion, to the lullaby that was not a song but a channel, a frequency through which something ancient and enormous and gentle moved through her into the world. Cale watched it all with a mixture of wonder and growing dread. Because moon singers were not just rare. They were contested. The last 3 documented moon singers had all been killed, not by enemies, but by their own allies, by wolves who feared the power or coveted it, or could not tolerate a force that operated outside the hierarchy of Alpha and Omega, dominance and submission. A moon singer answered to the earth, not to any pack structure. She could not be commanded. She could not be controlled. And for wolves who built their entire identity around control, that was unacceptable. Cale was not unacceptable. His wolf had already submitted to her, lying down in the warmth of her voice like it was the one thing it had been created for. But Cale was one wolf. The continental packs were hundreds, and whispers traveled fast. On the 23rd day, Dorian came to him with a communication from the Southern Coast Alpha. "They know," Dorian said. "I do not know how. Someone from Greymarch talked, or one of Renard's lawyers. But Alpha Voss at the Southern Coast has formally requested a meeting to discuss what he calls the strategic implications of the Moonsinger's emergence." "She is not a strategic implication," Cale said, and his voice contained a warning that Dorian wisely did not push against. "She is to them," Dorian said gently. "You know she is, Cale. A Moonsinger has not been seen in 3 centuries. Her power is the thing Sable has been reporting. If the Continental Pacts believe you have weaponized a Moonsinger, she's not a weapon. I know that. You know that. The Southern Coast does not know that. Neither does the Eastern Ridge or the Mountain Clans or any of the 12 packs that signed the Continental Accord under the assumption that no single Alpha would ever hold that kind of advantage." Cale was silent for a long time. Outside the war room window, the mountain valley was gold with late afternoon sun, and somewhere below, in the kitchen, Elara was humming while she cooked, and the herbs in the garden were stretching toward her voice. "They will come," Cale said. "Yes," Dorian said. "Not for a meeting. They will come with an army, and they will claim it is a peacekeeping action, and they will try to take her." "That is my assessment," Dorian said. "This." "When?" Boss is already mobilizing. I give it 3 weeks, maybe 4 as the weather holds. 3 weeks. Cale closed his eyes. His wolf was pacing now, the calm shattered, and he could feel it measuring distances and defensive positions and the number of soldiers at his command, and the probability that he could hold Ironhold against a coalition of 4 major packs attacking simultaneously, and the answer was not favorable. He could fight. He could win, probably, because he was the Alpha King and his wolves were the finest in the continent, and Ironhold had never been breached. But the cost would be measured in lives, his wolves' lives, and the war would not end at Ironhold. It would spread, pack against pack, territory against territory, a continental war over a woman who wanted nothing more than to cook stew and sing to a wolf pup and read books in a library window. He needed a different solution. He found Alara in the herb garden. Thistle was with her, the pup now nearly the size of a large dog, its silver fur clean and gleaming, its golden eyes alert. It lay at her feet while she knelt among the rosemary and thyme, her hands in the dirt, her face tilted toward the fading sun. She looked up when he approached. Something had changed in the way she looked at him over the past 3 weeks. The suspicion had not vanished, but it had thinned, like ice at the edges of a pond in early spring. Beneath it he could see something warmer, something that made his wolf whine softly against his ribs. "Sit with me," she said. He sat. The dirt was warm from the sun. He was the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and he sat in the dirt of a herb garden with his mate, who did not yet know she was his mate, and a wolf pup whose golden eyes watched him with an intelligence that exceeded any normal animal. "I need to tell you something," he said. She nodded. She had been expecting this, he realized. She had spent enough of her life waiting for bad news that she recognized the shape of it approaching. He told her everything, the Moonsinger legend, Sable's diagnosis, the growing power, the Continental Pact's awareness, Voss's mobilization. He did not soften it, he did not strategize around it. He sat in the dirt and told her the truth because he had promised her no cages, and a cage built from pleasant lies was still a cage. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Thistle pressed its muzzle against her knee. "So they will come for me," she said. "Yes, because of what I am, because of what they think you are. A weapon, a strategic asset, a lying item." She flinched at the last phrase. He saw it and hated himself for choosing those words, even though they were accurate. "What do you want to do?" she asked. The question surprised him. "What do I want to do? You are the Alpha King. You have a kingdom to protect. People, families, and fand. If giving me up prevents a war?" "No," Kyle said. The word came out harder than he intended, and his wolf surged behind it, and his eyes went gold for a flash before he controlled them. "That is not an option, Cale. That is not an option," he repeated. "My wolf will not survive it. I will not survive it. And even if I could, even if the bond were not a factor, I would not hand any person over to wolves who want to use them as a tool. That is what Renard did. I will not be another Renard." She looked at him. The setting sun was behind her, and it turned her auburn hair to fire, and her grey eyes were deep and complex. And there was something in them that he had not seen before, something that looked like the beginning of trust. "Then what do we do?" she said. "I have an idea," he said. "But you are not going to like it. Tell me." "The Continental Summit," he said. "In 2 weeks. Every alpha from every pack gathers at the neutral ground for the annual address. I attend every year. It is the one place where all packs are required to leave their armies behind. No weapons, no soldiers, just alphas and their mates. And," she said, "and I want to bring you. Not hidden, not protected, not as an asset or a weapon or a secret. As my mate, my claimed mate." The word hung between them, claimed. It carried weight in their world, weight that went beyond the romantic, beyond the emotional, into the biological, the spiritual. A claimed mate was sacrosanct under continental law. No pack could touch a claimed mate without declaring war on the claiming alpha. It was the oldest protection their kind had, older than treaties, older than territory lines, older than the Continental Accord itself. But claiming required consent, and consent required something that Alara had not yet given. "You are asking me to accept the mate bond," she said. "I am asking you to consider it." She pulled her hands out of the dirt. She looked at them. The chemical burns had faded over the past 3 weeks, but the scars remained, a map of damage on her forearms and fingers. She curled and uncurled them. "What if I accept the bond and it does not work?" she said. "What if the other alphas do not care? What if they come anyway?" "Then I fight," Kale said simply. "But I would rather fight a political battle at a summit than a military one on a battlefield. An acclaimed Moonsinger mate of the Alpha King is a very different political problem than an unclaimed Moonsinger being sheltered by the Alpha King. The first is a personal bond protected by ancient law. The second is an arms race." She was quiet again. Thistle had climbed into her lap, which was becoming increasingly impractical given the pup's size, and she absently scratched behind its ears. "I need you to understand something," she said finally. "I have spent my entire life being chosen for what I am. Chosen for labor, because I was an Omega. Chosen for the tannery because I was expendable. Chosen by you because I am a Moonsinger. I've never once been chosen for who I am. And I need—" She stopped. Started again. "I need to know that if I were not a Moonsinger, if I were just a tannery worker with chemical burns and a stolen pup and no power at all, I need to know that you would still be sitting in this dirt." Kyle looked at her. The sun had dropped below the mountain ridge, and the light was blue now, the blue of early evening in high altitude, and her face was shadowed and luminous at once. "I heard you from 400 miles away," he said. "Not the power, not the Moonsinger frequency. I heard mercy. I heard a woman singing to a dying animal in a closet because she could not bear to let it die alone. My wolf heard that and lay down for the first time in 6 years. That is who you are. The Moonsinger is what you are. And I am sitting in this dirt because of who?" She did not respond. She looked at him for a long, long time, and then she reached out and took his hand. The contact was electric, not metaphorically. His skin buzzed where her fingers touched his, a physical vibration that traveled up his arm and into his chest, and settled in the place where his wolf lived, and his wolf made a sound that was not a growl or a whine, but something else, something that sounded like home. Her eyes widened. She felt it too. The bond fully acknowledged for the first time, roaring to life between them like a fire that had been burning underground, finally breaking through to air. "Oh," she breathed. "That is—" "Oh, yeah," he said. His voice was rough. She did not let go of his hand. The Continental Summit was held at the neutral ground, a vast stone amphitheater built into a hillside at the geographic center of the continental wolf territories. It was ancient, older than any pack, older than written wolf history, a place where the first alphas had gathered when the world was young and the borders were not yet drawn. No violence had ever been committed on the neutral ground. It was sacred. Kyle arrived with Alara at his side and Dorian at his back, and Thistle, who had refused to be left behind, trotting at Alara's heel like a silver shadow. She wore a dress that Bridget had procured from somewhere, deep green, simple, well-made, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. The chemical scars on her arms were visible. She had not covered them. Kale had not asked her to. The amphitheater filled slowly with alphas from every territory. Kale knew them all by scent and reputation. Voss of the southern coast, a large blonde wolf with a politician's smile and a mercenary's eyes. Thane of the eastern ridge, old and wary, scarred from a dozen territorial disputes. Malron of the mountain clans, the only female alpha in the continental structure, who ran her pack with a ruthlessness that made Kale look gentle by comparison. Others, dozens. Each accompanied by their mates or their betas, each watching Kale and Elara with expressions that ranged from curiosity to calculation to poorly concealed hunger. Voss approached first. He always did. He was the type who preferred to control conversations by initiating them. Alpha Blackmere, Voss said. His eyes moved to Elara with an appraising quality that made Kale's wolf snarl behind his teeth. And this must be the Moonsinger everyone has been whispering about. Mrs. Elara, Cal said. My mate. A ripple went through the assembled alphas. Not quite a gasp, more of the collective inhale. Mate, Voss repeated. He looked at Elara's neck. The mark was there, fresh, the bite visible against the pale skin below her left ear. Kale had placed it 3 nights ago, in the library, with the moonlight coming through the window and the smell of old books and beeswax around them, and Elara had tilted her head and said, "No cage," and he had said, "No cage," and she had said, "Then yes," and his wolf had finally done the thing it had been aching to do since the moment he heard her lullaby from 400 miles away. Claimed. Bonded, the bite had sealed with silver light which was not normal, which was a Moonsinger thing, and the mark on her neck shimmered faintly even now, even in daylight. Voss saw it. His politician's smile did not falter, but his eyes changed. I see, Voss said, acclaimed mate. How convenient. Elara spoke before Kale could. I understand the word you mean to use is strategic, she said. The voice was calm, steady, the roughness from disuse and smoothed over the past weeks, and what remained was a voice like a river over stones, quiet but persistent, wearing away whatever was in its power. You are wondering if the claiming is genuine or political. You are calculating whether you can challenge it. Voss looked at her with new attention. I will save you the calculation, she said. It is genuine. I chose it. Not because an Alpha King told me to, and not because I needed protection, and not because a Moonsinger's bond is more powerful than a regular wolf's bond, although it is, but because he sat in the dirt with me when he did not have to, and he let me cry when he wanted to fix it, and he ate my stew and never once tried to tell me what I was. She paused. If you want to challenge the bond, she said, you are welcome to try. But you should know that the last wolf who tried to separate a Moonsinger from her bonded mate was an alpha named Harken of the Northern Frost 312 years ago, and what happened to his pack is the reason there is no Northern Frost territory on your maps anymore. The amphitheater was very quiet. Voss' smile had frozen. He looked at Cal, who was standing beside his mate with an expression that could best be described as restrained delight, his wolf utterly and completely calm behind his amber eyes. Well, Voss said. He cleared his throat. I believe the opening address is about to begin. He retreated. Marin of the mountain clans caught Elara's eye from across the amphitheater and gave a nod that was barely perceptible, but meant everything. The summit continued. There were speeches and negotiations and the usual territorial disputes brought forward for mediation. But the energy had shifted. Elara sat beside Kyle in the front row of the amphitheater. Thistle at her feet, the alphas, who had come prepared to discuss the Moonsinger problem, found that the problem had a name and a voice, and a scar on her cheek, and a pup with golden eyes, and a claimed mate bond that shimmered silver when the light hit it. She was not an asset. She was not a weapon. She was a person, and it is much harder to strategize the acquisition of a person than an asset, especially when that person can look you in the eye and recite 300-year-old pack history, with the quiet authority of someone who has spent 3 weeks consuming the Ironhold library, with the hunger of a woman who had been denied books for most of her life. It was not a total victory. Voss continued to circle the question for days. Dane of the Eastern Ridge requested a formal demonstration of Moonsinger abilities for verification purposes, and Kale told him to request it again when he was prepared to demonstrate his own abilities first, which ended that line of inquiry. There were concessions, compromises, a new addendum to the Continental Accord that established protections for rare wolf types, including but not limited to moonsingers, which Alara helped draft because she had read the entire existing accord in 2 days and found 17 logical inconsistencies that the pact lawyers had missed. But the war did not come. The coalition that Voss had been building dissolved, not because the Alpha suddenly became noble, but because the political calculation no longer favored aggression. A claimed mate was untouchable. A moonsinger who could cite continental law and make herb gardens grow with her humming and stare down an Alpha twice her size without blinking was a poor candidate for kidnapping. The risk exceeded the reward, the spreadsheet, if you will, no longer balanced. Renard would have understood. They returned to Ironhold in late autumn when the mountain valley had turned to amber and rust, and the air tasted of wood smoke and approaching snow. The pack had grown in their absence. Word of a moonsinger at Ironhold had drawn wolves from across the continent. Not soldiers or sycophants, but the lost ones, the ones who did not fit in their packs, the Omegas and the Runts and the wolves whose powers did not match the hierarchy they had been born into. They came to Ironhold the way Alara had come, uncertain and damaged and hoping, and Kael accepted them because that was the kind of Alpha his mate had shown him he wanted to be. On the first night of the first snow, Alara stood at the library window and watched the white come down. Thistle, now fully grown, an enormous silver wolf with golden eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, lay at her feet. The pup that had been thrown in a drainage ditch was now the largest wolf in Ironhold after Kael's own, and it followed Alara everywhere, with a devotion that bordered on worship. Kael came in with 2 mugs of the herbal tea she liked, the one made from the thyme and chamomile she grew in the garden that bloomed year-round, now regardless of season. He set one on the windowsill beside her and wrapped his hands around the other, and leaned against the opposite side of the window frame. She looked at him. The snow caught in the window light and threw soft moving patterns across her face. Her grey eyes, her scar, the silver shimmer of the claiming mark on her neck. "I have been thinking about Renard," she said. Kael raised an eyebrow. "Not about forgiving him," she said. "I do not think I will ever do that. But I have been thinking about how easy it is to turn a person into a number. How you can start with a spreadsheet and end with a girl in a tannery and never feel like you made a decision to be cruel. You just followed the math." She sipped her tea. "I do not want us to follow the math," she said. "The wolves who are coming here, the lost ones, I do not want them to become line items. I do not want Ironhold to become another Greymarch with better lighting." "It will not," Kael said. She looked at him. "How do you know?" "Because I have you," he said. "And your job, apparently, is to stand in my library and tell me when I am about to become a spreadsheet." She almost smiled, that actual full smile that he had been building toward for weeks, the one that transformed her face from guarded to luminous. Almost. The corner of her mouth lifted, and her eyes went warm, and Thistle's tail thumped once against the floor. "That is a terrible job," she said. "A man, it pays in stew." 4 bowls, she said. 5 if the bread is fresh. She laughed. It was quiet, barely more than an exhale, but it was real, and his wolf lay down in his chest and closed its eyes. Outside, the snow fell over Ironhold Keep, over the obsidian walls and the herb garden and the kitchen where Bridget was already making tomorrow's bread. It fell over the mountain valley and the roads that led south past the forests and the borderlands, all the way to a tannery on the lowest edge of a territory that was no longer Renard's and never should have been. The drainage ditch behind the tannery was empty now, filling with white. Alara set her tea down and crossed the space between them. She put her hand on his chest over the place where his wolf lived, and she hummed 3 notes of the lullaby, and the wolf inside him pressed against her palm from the other side of his skin. She leaned up and kissed the cut on his cheekbone, the one from the branch he had not bothered to dodge on his 3-day run to find her. It had scarred, a small white line mirroring hers. "Matching set," she said. He put his arms around her. She let him. Thistle sighed from the floor, the deep contented sigh of a wolf who has found its people. The snow kept falling. The tea grew cold. The library was warm and the books were patient, and neither of them moved for a very long time.